All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today we're jumping right into a really fascinating political puzzle over on the island of Borneo. We're going to try and figure out why the largest indigenous group in the Malaysian state of Sarawak seems so politically divided. So, at the very heart of this mystery are the Dayak people. Now, you'd think, right, that as the biggest indigenous community there, they'd be this massive unified political force. But, well, the reality is way more complicated than that. I mean, check this out. The Dayak community makes up a whopping 40% of Sarawak's population. 40%. With numbers like that, they should be an absolute political powerhouse, right? An unstoppable force. But that's just not what we see happening. Instead of banding together to really flex that political muscle, Dayak voters often end up supporting the parties already in power. And this is even when opposition parties are making these really direct appeals to their shared ethnic identity. So, yeah, what's really going on here? You know, that old saying, a house divided against itself cannot stand, really hits the nail on the head here. To figure this all out, we've got to dig into the history and see how this house got so divided to begin with. Okay, so where do we start? Let's look at the most recent state election. It's the perfect place to see this central conflict, this real tug of war between two big ideas: ethnic unity on one side and the promise of real, tangible development on the other. So on one side of the ring, you've got the opposition parties, like Parti Sarawak Bersatu or PSB. They went all in on a platform of what they called Dayakism, and their promise? It was huge. They said, let's unite the community, and for the very first time, we'll put a Dayak chief minister in charge. Now, this was a really direct, really powerful appeal to ethnic identity. This wasn't just about small policy changes. No, this was a promise to fundamentally shake up the state's entire power structure, to finally make it reflect its largest indigenous group. But then, on the other side, you have the ruling coalition, Gabungan Parti Sarawak. We'll call them GPS. They took a totally different tack. Their campaign was all about a broader Sarawak First idea. They promised stability, new roads, new projects, even direct financial aid. You could say it was a pitch aimed squarely at the wallet, not just the heart. So the election happens, and the results? Whoa, it was an absolute landslide for GPS, the ruling coalition. I mean, the message from voters couldn't have been clearer. For most people, the promise of real, concrete development was just way more convincing than the call for ethnic unity. Okay, so why? To really get why this happened, we've got to zoom in. We need to shift our focus from the high-level state politics and get down to the grassroots level, see how things actually work on the ground, especially in the traditional longhouses. Let's take a look at a place called Lubok, Antu. It's a rural area, mostly Iban, and it's a perfect case study. See, out here, politics is super personal, and local traditions play a massive role in how people cast their votes. And right in the middle of all this is a really unique cultural practice called tungkus. Now, traditionally, this was about compensation, maybe for using someone's land or something like that, but today it's been adapted for the world of modern politics. And take a look at this. This is a proposed rate sheet for tungkus. It basically lays out how much voters should get reimbursed for the cost of traveling home to vote. It's all broken down from about 50 ringgit if you're coming from a nearby town, all the way up to 200 if you have to travel from a city as far away as Miri. Okay, and this is the really crucial part. From the outside, you might look at this and just think, oh, that's vote buying. But for the locals, it's not seen that way at all. Like this voter from Mary says, it's seen as fair compensation for their travel time and lost wages. It's part of a cultural system of patronage, a reciprocal thing. It's not a bribe to buy their vote, which they see as a separate secret decision. So, this whole system of really local, personal politics, it didn't just pop up overnight. To really, really get to the bottom of this, we have to wind the clock back and see how these divisions were first created and then reinforced throughout history. First thing to get our heads around is that before the colonial era, there was no such thing as a single, unified Dayak or Iban identity. It just didn't exist. The whole concept as we know it today was pretty much invented by outsiders, mostly for their own administrative convenience. Instead, identity was hyper-local. I mean, really local. People identified with their manoa. That's their specific territory. It could be a whole river basin, or it could be just the area around their own longhouse. So you weren't Iban, you were one of the people from the Scrang River, or from the Antu River. It was a totally different way of seeing yourself. And then came the Brooke Rajas. They ruled Sarawak for a century. And they didn't just notice these local divisions, they actively exploited them. It was a classic divide and rule strategy. They formalized these ethnic categories and, get this, even used some Iban groups to fight other Iban groups. This history of fragmentation has left a really deep mark, and it helps explain why political unity is so hard to come by. You can even see it in the collapse of an early political alliance back in the 60s. And if that wasn't enough, you have to look at the traditional Iban leadership culture itself. It actually works against creating a single unified power structure. There's no king, no inherited aristocracy. Instead, a leader has to constantly earn their respect through their achievements and by delivering on their promises. And if a leader fails, well, their followers can just withdraw their support and give it to a more promising challenger. This super flexible, merit-based system makes it almost impossible for any one person to command loyalty across the entire community. So, okay, let's put all these pieces together. You've got the modern battle of identity versus development. You've got the on-the-ground view from the Longhouse. And you've got these deep, deep echoes from history. When you line it all up, the puzzle actually starts to make a whole lot of sense. You see, the Dayak vote isn't really contradictory when you look at it this way. It's actually a series of very rational calculations. For many, a regional Sarawakian identity is just stronger than an ethnic one. Immediate things like development projects and aid are often more valuable than abstract promises of power down the road. And when you add in that long history of division and a patronage system that rewards siding with whoever's in charge, well, sticking with the status quo becomes a pretty logical choice. So I guess the most important thing to take away from all this is that you just can't look at the Dayak people as one single monolithic voting bloc. It doesn't work that way. Their political choices are the result of a really complex reality, one that's been shaped by all these unique cultural, historical, and economic forces we've been talking about. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. As this broader, unified Sarawak First identity seems to get stronger and stronger, what does that mean for the future of politics that's centered only on Dayak identity? That right there is the question that's probably going to define the next chapter of Sarawak's political story.